Hey, what's up? It's your girl Diamond Anisha, aka Didi, also known as D Said So. This is my YouTube channel, Didi Said So, and we are on live today. We're going to be reading The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hempworth. Normally, I like to give a little bit of time for people to get on because I start at 12:30, but I started a little late because I got off work a little late. Um, if you're watching the replay, thank you, appreciate you. I'm going to read the synopsis and I'm just going to jump right in. I think it doesn't say how many pages the book is on what I was looking on. 83 pages. So I think we're just going to take a straight shot and film it all the way through. I'm going to the gym tomorrow, but I'm not going at 4:30. So whatever time I get off live, I'm giving myself at least 4 hours to sleep, and then I'll go to the gym when I wake up, and then I'll take a nap when I come back. That's just how I operate. That's how I roll. The Ex-Wives Club. This is the second book in the um, Alibis collection. The first book we read was Death Row by Frida McFadden, which is up on my page, so you can check that out. I think they're all standalones. Like they're not correlated. They're just like a bunch of a bunch of authors that decided to work together. Okay, so it says when a restaurateur and serial philanderer turns up stone cold dead, his trio of exes fall under suspicion in a sharp-witted and suspenseful short story by the New York Times bestseller author of Darling Girls. Celebrity chef Ian Curley is found dead in his walk-in freezer. The prime suspects are the three ex-wives who meet up every Friday evening in their favorite corner booth of his restaurant. It's a tradition for Anna. It's a tradition for Anita, Mary Jane, and Rosie to drink, dine, and commiserate, but commit murder? All aggrieved, each one has a motive and an alibi. And brilliant detective has reservations. Who did it? The night will tell. Sally Hempworth was the author. The Ex-Wives Club is part of Alibis, a collection of short stories about lies, truth, and deception. It's just a matter of what you can get away with. They can be read or listened to in one setting. So we're going to see if we're going to get that one setting, and we're going to go for it. So it looks like we have a prologue. We have 21 chapters, no epilogue, and an author's note. Sally Hepworth, The Ex-Wives Club. Prologue. Danny's life wasn't turning out all the way that he planned. When he decided to embark upon a career in hospitality, he imagined himself flambeing bananas, tasting sauces with his pinky, and shouting, "Where the F is the cook I've been?" at incompetent kitchen staff. Afterwards, he wasn't too tired. He might even prop himself up at the bar in a good glass of red, gladly handed wealthy customers and attempted to sleep with the waitresses. After all, that's what his boss Ian Curley did every night. Instead, Danny cleaned calamari, mopped floors, and opened up for the breakfast shift at 5 a.m. on Saturdays. Worst, in the year he worked at the Curley's restaurant, he hadn't slept with a single waitress, and not for one of trying. It was still dark as Danny entered Curly's, the kitchen bustling with activity just hours earlier, lay silent save for the hum of the refrigeration units. Danny pictured Ian, fast asleep in his penthouse apartment with his naked young girlfriend draped across him. Ian Curley was one lucky BASCARD. Married 3 times, not that Danny envied him on that. Each time to an even younger, hotter babe. His current lady, Emma, was a bona fide goddess and young enough to be his daughter. Danny didn't get it. Sure, Ian was rich and had a certain Kevin Costner thing going on. And yes, he had charm when he wanted to, but so did Danny. His grandmother always told him so. But did any of the babes look in his direction? Nope. The world wasn't fair. Danny flicked on the lights and then made his way to the back where the deep freeze stood. The real chefs would be here soon, and they wanted their pastries defrosted. When he pulled open the door, the fluorescent bulb took a minute to activate, and in the shadows, Danny was confused by what he saw in the middle of the floor. Had Ian ordered a hog, one of those specials? Had it fallen from the rack? There was a buzzing sound. Then the light flickered on. It wasn't a hog. Ian Curley wasn't as lucky as Danny thought. Chapter 1. Detective Inspector Charlene Lee. Detective Inspector Charlene Lee tossed her yellow notepad and pen onto the laminated table and pulled out a chair. So, Collins, What have you got? For lunch, Detective Andre Collins didn't lift the gaze from his phone, but his tone was hopeful. It's not even 10 a.m. Besides, judging from the way that his belly strayed against the lower buttons of his shirt, he didn't need lunch, regardless of the time. Oh, Collins replied. Shame. Lee started staring at the shiny top of his bald head. She knew that in the Victorian Police Homicide Squad, as in life, one had to take with the good with the bad. The good was that she had been appointed senior investigating officer in the Ian Curley murder case. Do, 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 do. That wasn't good for Ian, obviously. There was nothing good about being bludgeoned and left to die in your own. Oh Jesus! I wish that I could move. I need to move this over here. Give me a second. I got too much stuff going on. All right. Lee stared at the shiny top of his bald head. She knew that in the Victorian Police Homicide Squad, as in life, one had to take the good with the bad. The good was that she'd been appointed senior investigator officer in the Ian Curley murder case. That wasn't good for Ian, obviously. There was nothing good about being bludgeoned and left to die in your own restaurant freezer. But it was, nonetheless, good for Lee. Hey Pierce, how you doing? In homicide, most of the cases that crossed her desk were drug related or gang related, and while these had their share of excitement, they were also often predictable and left her speaking with a lot of idiots. But as a wealthy restaurateur and a lot of suspects, this was a sophisticated air to it. Melbourne may have been a big city, the most cosmopolitan city in Australia when it came to arts and culture. Um, but still, that kind of thing didn't come up every day. A prestige murder. Lee was excited. The bad was that Lee had been issued Collins as her second in charge. Collins was a nephew of the superintendent, a lazy, half-witted chauvinist who had been moved on from every unit, each one of them vaguely cited poor fit as the reason. The fact that he whistled when she introduced herself, then quickly added that she didn't need to worry. He didn't have the yellow fever, gave her some indication of why he was a poor fit. Wow. We're reading The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hempworth. To make matters worse, Lee was going to be spending a lot of time with Collins in a very small interview room, and she just discovered he had a dreadful BO. Can you please put down your phone? She asked. Collins reluctantly agreed. Right then, Lee said. Deceased is 55 years of age, broken nose, blunt force trauma to the head, found in the kitchen of his own restaurant in the commercial freezer with broken interior handle. The coroner is yet to determine if death occurred before or after he was frozen. No weapon found at the scene. Collins nodded, but Lee could tell that he was still thinking about lunch. Suspects? That's meant to be my question to you. Oh, she waited. Nothing, for Christ's sake. His three ex-wives and current girlfriend were all at the restaurant last night, Lee said. He also has two children who work at the restaurant. Generally speaking, they all get along, but the on-scene detectives have indicated that there was tension in the air last night. On top of this, we have several disgruntled staff members. Collins might as well have been a mannequin. She thought about waving a hand in front of his face to see if anyone was home. Did you check the security footage? She asked him. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head. Yep, he said. Nothing. Lee was encouraged at least that he had done the one thing she asked him. Well then, we need to get everyone in here. The ex-wives, the girlfriends, the kids, the staff. Today. The earlier we speak to them, the better. We don't want to give them a chance to get their story straight. He nodded but didn't move. Lee snapped her fingers. Go, Colin. Oh, he said, by we you meant me. If this case went on too long, they might have another murder on their hands. Chapter 2. The Night of the Murder. Anita Curley was Ian's first wife and the first of Ian's ex-wives to arrive at Curley's on Friday night. She was always the first. Anita, Mary Jane, and Rosie met every Friday night at the same time in the same corner booth, a steady, comforting tradition that had begun early after Ian divorced MJ, and that had in recent months grown to include his soon-to-be third ex-wife, Rosie. They called themselves somewhat unimaginatively the Ex-Wives Club. The purpose of the Ex-Wives Club, at least initially, was allow Anita to continue her relationship with MJ, with whom she became close with while she was married to Ian, which she suggested Curly after their meeting place. Ian had been weary. He hadn't known yet what a boom it would become. The table was reserved for Ian's ex-wives, a customer whispered to his wife one night as Ian led them past the corner booth. They come here every week. The food must be good if your exes keep coming back, another customer commented. A food critic even mentioned them in his review. Most men wouldn't be happy to have their ex-wives gathered in the room, let alone gathered in the corner booth of his restaurant, the reviewer wrote. But Chef Ian Curley is the most men. The women teasing Ian and laughing with the staff contributed as much to the ambiance as the smells that wafted from the kitchen. Each member of the ex-wives club is separated by a decade in age. Anita is 50, Mary Jane is 40, and Rosie, thanks so much. Have a good night. And Rosie, his soon to be third ex wife, is just 30 years old. Ian is 55. Ian has been delighted. You can't buy this kind of press, he said. He wasn't wrong, and since he started seeing Emma after 5 years, Rosie's junior, interest in the whole setup had skyrocketed even further. The article also suggested that free food for life was in the divorce contract, which wasn't true. Still, the ex-wives never paid a dime. Free food was the least Ian could do for them, and while he enjoyed grumbling about it, he must have agreed because he never brought a bill to their table. There was no official hierarchy in the ex-wives club, although at first, ex-wife, the oldest, the wealthiest, Anita considered herself the matriarch. It was a role that, particularly of late, she had been taken very seriously. Sparkling water, Anita? Yvette the waitress held up a bottle of Perrier. The corner booth was already set with the usual spread of Ian's signature appetizers. Mini coriander because Rosie didn't like it, minus shellfish because Mary Jane was allergic. Ian was a much better host than husband. Thank you, Yvette. That would be lovely. Yvette poured with one hand behind her back the way all the staff did, but no one else did it with so much grace as Yvette. There was something mesmerizing about Yvette, and it was just her French accent. Apparently, the staff called her the French spy for her ruthless efficiency as well as for the fact that she was the only person employed by Ian who had never received a bollocking. She was somewhere on the continuum between stunning and strange looking, like a very beautiful, very petite praying mantis. She was new to Curly's only 6 weeks in, but already proven to be an asset. Ian couldn't believe his luck when he found her. It was hard for him to hold down good staff, all charm front of the house, all red-faced rage in the kitchen. But Yvette took it in stride. It was probably because she was French. French people are like cats. Anita had always thought elegant, composed, and a little bit terrifying. Is Max working, Yvette? We, Yvette put the bottle on the table. I just saw him in the kitchen. Anita already knew this, of course. She knew her son's schedule to the minute, a slightly unhealthy habit of hers, considering that he was 23 and hadn't lived with her in years. It had always been that way. In fact, she once considered herself a chill mom, but in the past 6 months or so, she found herself suddenly anxious, waking at night with worries over her boy. It was, of course, 6 months ago that Max had started working at Curly's. He's my only son, Ian had said when Anita protested. Ian was already so hard on the boy, she couldn't imagine what working by his father's side day after day would do to Max's self-esteem. Who else is going to take over the business? I don't know, perhaps your daughter, Daisy? That girl can barely carry a plate. Daisy was Ian's daughter with MJ, but Anita was fond of her and felt offended on her behalf. Anyway, Ian said, Max needs some direction. That boy was drifting. As usual, Ian got his way, and no one had hoped more than Anita that Max would take to the hospitality life. But Anita had been right about the effective work of Max working closely with his father. The last few times Anita had seen her boy, he'd been pale, weedy, withdrawn, depressed, she suspected. Yvette placed an open menu in Anita's hands. I'll take your orders when the orders arrive. The restaurant was already busy but not overcrowded. Emma, the social media manager and Ian's new girlfriend, was moving about the space, snapping photos and making videos to edit and correct for social media. Anita had been her had what? Anita had seen her stuff and she was good. Her reels were classy, as at atmospheric and aspirational, the essence of Curly's. Some bosses might have given her a pay raise. Ian made her his girlfriend. What the heck? She saw Ian across the room now, making a fuss over the two elderly women who just arrived. Both were already giggling. The charm of his had won over many a customer, including Anita. She met him at business conference 25 years ago when she was a junior marketing executive, and Graham, a colleague of hers, had reached for the last steak stick from satay stick from a circling waiter. Ian, of course, had been that waiter. I'm afraid I was saving that one for the lady, he said. Sweeping the tray from Graham's reach, he was stupidly handsome, tall, blue eyes, sharp jawline, and a good head of steady hair. Thank you, she said, but I'm not hungry. But I ran the gauntlet of hungry men to get this to you. That guy actually chased me. He pointed with one finger to the CEO, Scott Hamilton, who was looking red faced and annoyed. I was like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, ducking and weaving. If you don't take it now, it will break my heart. He winked at Anita. Take it for God's sake, Graham said. The man's about to get fired. The least you can do is eat his dang satay. It had been so easy to fall in love with Ian. It was his twinkling eyes, the way he oozed confidence. He made young women laugh with his dry humor. He made men feel important by implying that they had fine taste. He comped drinks, meals, desserts left and right, center just because. He became what everyone wanted him to be, including for a while Anita. But there was another side to Ian. Unfortunately, by the time Anita found out, she was in too deep. Well, if it's not ex-wives two or three, Ian said in a jolly voice, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. People looked up from their meals and smiled. MJ, he said, kissing her cheek. She was wearing a beautiful tie-dye silk shirt and pants that looked like pajamas, and her makeup-free skin glowed with herbal, organic, cruelty-free goodness. Her reddish blonde curls was a hectic mess around her face, and from the look at her chest reason, she wasn't wearing a bra. And Rosie? Ian leaned in to kiss Rosie, but she strolled past him. Ian appeared to take it good naturally, but if you were attuned to him like Anita was, you would feel his irritation. Let it go, Rosie, Anita wailed her. For everyone's sake, let it go. She waved to Anita and walked toward the table, her skin shimmering faintly with sweat. She must have come straight from Pilates class. Diners stole glances at her as she walked past, men and women. Activewear wasn't your typical attire for Curly's on a Friday night, but Rosie got away with it. People who looked like Rosie could get away with anything. Hi, ladies, Anita said as she slid into the booth. Hi, Anita. MJ was smiling like it was school photography day. Anita was about to ask about it when Ian approached. Margarita for you, MJ, Ian said, placing one in front of her, and a green smoothie for the fitness fanatic. He was still a handsome man, Anita thought as she observed him, perhaps even more than she when he was young. His sandy hair was green at the temples, which gave him a distinguished air. He placed the green smoothie in front of Rosie. It wasn't on the menu. It was something he created for Rosie back when he was sleeping with her. Rosie looked like she wanted to throw it at him. Can I have a word? Anita asked him quietly. He said a margarita in front of her. Just one? It's about Max. I'm worried. She glanced towards the kitchen, hoping to catch a glimpse of him reaching for a docket. Inside, she locked eyes with Yvette, who signaled that she'd be there to take their orders in a moment. Stop coddling the boy. He's fine. He waved at someone across the room. Enjoy your drinks, ladies. Ian, MJ interrupted. Before you go, I have an announcement to make. But Ian was already shaking the hand of a man in a sports jacket. Ian! He held up a finger indicating he'd be right back, then launched into a conversation with yet another customer. Was he always an a-hole? Rosie wondered out loud. Yes, MJ said. Just not to us. It was why we fell in love with him. It made us so special. You're right, Rosie said. What a clever trick. And now Emma's falling for it, Anita said. The three of them looked over at Emma, the newest and youngest conquest of their ex-husband. Emma was around the same age as his son and only a few years older than his daughter. Anita had always played the role of the dignified, the classy ex-wife, except Ian's behavior was a good grace under the guise of what was best for the family. But lately she found herself wanting to grab Emma by the arm and say, Run away from him, darling. Run as fast as you possibly can. If you're just joining, we're reading The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hempworth. Chapter 3 Interview with Yvette Renard. Yvette Renard sat with her elbows on the armrest of her chair, a mild look of disdain on her face. She didn't appear intimidated by the fact that she'd been called into the police station to give a statement about her dead boss. If anything, Detective Lee was the one who was intimidated. Thank you for coming in, Miss Renard, Lee started. I'm Detective Inspector Lee. I'm the senior investigating officer on this case. This is Detective Collins. May I call you Yvette? Her gaze flickered up and down, but the look of disdain remained. She was just so French. A decade or two ago, she had been smoking. You may call me what you like. Yvette, we believe Ian was murdered between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. last night. I understand you were on the closing shift. We? What time did you leave? She thought for a minute. Must have been around 11. Was anyone else there? Ian was in the freezer getting some croissants. croissants. Lee tried to exchange a look with Collins for effect, but he was staring out the window. At 11 at night, Yvette stared at her, unblinking. Lee could have imagined grown women withering under Yvette's expressions. E is the boss. E can pleasure himself in the freezer at 11 if E chooses. Colin snickered. What was Ian like as a boss? Lee said. E, he's not saying E. She's not saying he. She's saying E, like the letter E. Hey Fred, how you doing today? E was. She appeared to search for the word lubrique. Lubrique. Collins repeated lewd. Yvette tried again. Lucretius. Creepy. Now it was getting interesting, Lee thought. Did he come on to you? She laughed. E wouldn't dare. Lee believed it, and yet there was something magnetic about Yvette. It was surprising that Ian, being as lubricant as he was, had come on to her. Was there anything unusual about Ian the last time you saw him? No, she said. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, except E was covered in blood. Even Collins looked up at that, and its nose was bleeding up, like someone had punched him. Had they? How should I know? You didn't ask? Why would I? So you can come to get croissants and so you came to get croissants and you left him there? Yvette examined her fingernails. My job description does not include taking him home to tuck him into bed, detective. It was a gift, her ability to make one feel stupid without raising her voice, breaking a sweat, or even lifting an eyebrow. So you left Ian at the restaurant and went home? No, no, I went to the police station. My wallet was taken from my bag last night, so I went to report it. What time was this? 11:30 or so. I had to wait over an hour to give my statement, and then it took almost half an hour and then it took about half an hour. I get home around 1 a.m. As far as alibis went, this one was pretty airtight. Can anyone verify that? They have security cameras at the police station, no? And the security cameras at the restaurant will show that when I left the restaurant, Ian was alive. There was one in the restaurant, one in the kitchen, and one in the parking lot. Detective Lee looked at Collins. Did you see that, Collins? He looked blank. For Christ's sake, his only job so far, other than to sit in the interviews with her, was to go through all the security footage. I've had enough of all of this now, Yvette said, standing. It wasn't how a police interview typically ended, but since she was already halfway out the door, and Lee was distracted by the realization that she had gone through all the security footage again herself, she allowed it. Please don't make any arrangements to go anywhere, Lee called after her. We'll be waiting to speak with you soon. We'll be, we'll be wanting to speak with you again soon. All right, chapter 4, the night of the murder. MJ Curley didn't have. Okay, so push pause. I was given that this is going to be back and forth. Present day will obviously be interviews with the staff and the ex-wives, and then we'll be going back to the night of the murder, as it took place and how it happened. Chapter 4, the night of the murder. MJ Curley didn't have uncharitable thoughts about people as a philosophical Buddhist. She strived. Oh, MJ is the second wife. She strived to only put out what she wanted to get back. And yet, as Ian walked away from her, she found herself wanting to slap her darling ex-husband across the face. It was silly that she thought of him as her darling, particularly since while he could be a darling, more often than that, he was a jerk. What did you want to announce, MJ? Anita asked. MJ shook her head. Ian needs to be here. Why? Rosie sipped her smoothie. Because it's about Daisy, MJ said. On cue, Daisy walked past, leading a group of middle-aged women to their table. She gave MJ a tiny wave. Daisy had been working at the restaurant as a hostess since she finished high school. Even though she was 18 now, she had a big blue-eyed innocence that made it hard to think of her as anything other than a little girl. MJ grabbed Ian's arm as he headed past them towards the kitchen. Ian, hold on a minute. I have something very exciting to announce. His eyeballs widened. Uh-oh, you're not pregnant, are you? Ian was the king of deadpan humor. It was his British upbringing, and he was beloved for it. But MJ always found it a little rude. She preferred that Ian had been when she met him, back when she'd been raising a star, back when she'd been a rising star in the local art scene, and the deadpan humor was reserved for everyone else. They met at one of MJ's. Like these words is tripping me up. It ain't even hard words. It's like everyday words. They met at one of MJ's exhibitions. MJ had been standing by one of her favorite pieces, a swirling vortex of reds and golds, when Ian had approached her. She noticed him. Of course, Ian was the kind of man you notice. It wasn't just his good looks, it was his presence, his aura, the way the room seemed to arrange itself around him so he remained at the center no matter where he stood. He was a light. Stunning, Ian had said, his gaze fixed on the painting. The way that the colors clashed yet somehow harmonized is captivating. Thank you. It's one of my favorite darling. It's one of my more daring pieces. Ian had turned to her, his eyes warm and inviting. You're the artist? I am, MJ had replied, offering her hand. Ian Curly, he said, shaking her hand firmly. I own Curly's. MJ was impressed. Curly's was one of Melbourne's most prestigious restaurants known for its exquisite cuisine and impeccable service. The fact that Ian was older added an air of sophistication to their conversation. We're looking for some artwork for the restaurant. I'd like to commission you to create artwork for the whole place. Their relationship had started with the same intensity as their initial meeting, passionate and full of promise. MJ had fallen for him quickly, believing he was the partner she had always dreamed of, but Ian's admiration had soon waned. She began to suspect other women. Ian, of course, denied it. She spent a long time with her head in the sand, but eventually she found the proof she didn't want. It was the truth that Rosie had been the other woman, but MJ had forgiven her. If Ian had someone in his sights, there was very little that they could do to stop it happening. Besides, Rosie had been very difficult to dislike. She was warm and friendly and full of life, and her energy. Hey, Andre, how are you? Both MJ and Anita had taken her Pilates classes and they were fantastic. She was far too young for Ian, but that was to be expected. Handsome, wealthy men didn't go for women their own age, did they? Still, there was something endearing about her neon pink nails, her pink Apple Watch, and her friendship bracelet that spelled out the word Rosie. It reminded MJ of something Daisy would wear. Daisy, MJ called after her daughter as her daughter walked past. Wait up a minute. Daisy's working, MJ. Ian said. You're the boss. Give her a break, MJ said. Yvette, fetch Max. Yvette looked to Ian, who nodded reluctantly. MJ and Anita shared a glance. You think that he could at least pretend to like his children? The look said, especially since they usually did a reasonable job of pretending to like him. Max coped to the worst of I'm Max coped to the worst of it from Ian. Ian Rosenboy always asking about his grades, which were average, or his sporting abilities, above average, but not where Ian wanted them to be. His interaction with Max echoed of the sports coach, and usually involved Ian offering tips on how to improve and suggest he take a long, hard look at himself. When Daisy was born, MJ had been optimistic that Ian would be different with the girl. In many ways, he was. Ian wasn't hard on Daisy at all. Unfortunately, his utter indifference felt even more hurtful. Right then, Ian said when Max arrived, red-faced from the kitchen. What is it, Daisy? Some regular customers came in the door and Ian waved. Daisy stood there, shy and awkward. Okay, I got it to Harvard. There was a crash in the kitchen and Ian turned momentarily to glare at someone. What did you say, darling? Anita asked. Okay, Daisy looked less sure of herself. I got into Harvard. Harvard America? Rosie asked. When Ian looked back at the group, his face was tinged with impatience. What's all this? Daisy got into Harvard, MJ said, unable to make her daughter say it again. Yes, Harvard in America, the Ivy League. MJ let out a little squeal to indicate how these people were supposed to behave. I don't understand, Ian said. Why would Daisy go to Ivy League? Ian, Anita said quietly. Ian looked at Daisy. I thought you wanted to write poetry. Novels, she said. I do. I want to study literature. Wow, Daisy, Max exclaimed. That's amazing. Congratulations. He patted his sister on the shoulder and MJ felt a wave of love for her former stepson. She also felt a wave of concern at the sight of his hands, which were bruised and scabed at the knuckles. Can you study literature here in Australia? Ian asked her. Daisy looked mortified. I don't know. I thought Harvard sounds expensive, Ian said. It's more expensive than university here, MJ said, but it's not like you can't afford it, Ian. Besides, I think we're missing the point. Daisy got in. It was an enormous amount of work and extremely competitive. Ian shook his hand as a customer who was on his way past. I understand, and well done, love, he said when the customer was gone. I just don't understand why you go to college in America when we have lots of perfectly good universities here. Event table 9 is ready to order. Well, Anita said, I think congratulations is in order for Daisy. Well done, darling. Thank you, Daisy said, looking at her feet. Her cheeks were flaming. Yes, congratulations, Daisy, Rosie added. MJ had expected champagne, Drinks on the house. A round of applause for a daughter who just got into one of the top universities in the world. Anyway, Ian said, I think that it's a matter that she should be discussed privately later. Max, Daisy, and I have to get to work. Kids, let's go. Ian gestured with his thumb and Max took off, but Daisy stayed. Her face was still red, but she didn't look as embarrassed as she had a moment earlier. Daisy, Ian said, a warning note in his voice now. Again, she didn't leave. Instead, she leaned forward and took Rosie's green smoothie out of her hand. Before her father could summon her a third time, she threw it in his face. Wow. Chapter 5. Interview with Daisy Curley. Lee clicked her pen. Click, 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 click. It was a technique her boss had taught her to make interviews uncomfortable, and she used it often. Although she were honest, she did it mostly because she found it satisfying. Daisy Curley, you're the daughter of Ian Curley, correct? Click, click. Yes. Judging by Daisy's pale face and wide eyes, her technique was working well. And you were working as a hostess at Curley last night? Yes. I understand you were involved in an argument with your father last night. Several people witnessed you throwing a drink at him. Daisy didn't reply. Her eyes darted back and forth as if she needed to make a guess on a game show. Lee almost felt sorry for her. Did you throw a drink at your father, Daisy? She nodded. For the record, I need you to say yes or no. Yes. Why would you do that? Daisy shrugged, her gaze dropping away. It's a long story, but the short version, I was offered a place at Harvard and he was the a-hole about it. He talked about how expensive it was and wanted to know why I wouldn't just go to university here. Wow, Lee said. Most parents would be over the moon if their child got into Harvard. Daisy nodded sadly. You must have been disappointed your father wasn't more excited, she continued. I was. So what happened after you threw the drink? Lee asked. I quit. You quit? Daisy hesitated. Well, I was fired, but I was going to quit anyway. That must be upsetting. Not really, her glum expression said otherwise. So he fired you, Lee said. Then what did you do? I left. Where did you go? I don't want to say. Her voice was quiet. It was barely audible. You don't want to say? Lee glanced at Collins. His gaze was fixated on the distance as if he was trying to decide what to have for dinner. For God's sake, Daisy, this is a homicide investigation. I know, but I can't. Her head was down, her eyes closed. Now this was getting interesting. Daisy, you have something to do with your father's death? No, she looked up. I didn't, I swear. Then where were you? Lee waited, but Daisy didn't reply. Chapter 6. The Night of the Murder. Max Curley was at his station when Daisy returned to the kitchen. It was clear that she had been crying. Danny, the kitchen hand, was all over her like a fly on crap. You okay, babe? He dropped his mop and bucket and slung an arm around. He dropped his mop and bucket and slung an arm low around her waist. He was a weird looking dude, hair cut into a mullet, eyes too far apart. He reminded Max of a weasel or a sloth. Max fought every one of his instincts telling him to go and smack Danny's smarmy arm off of Daisy. If he left his station, his father would go ballistic. Daisy wiped her nose. I'm good, thanks, Danny. But Danny didn't remove his arm. Hands off my sister, Max said. Reluctantly, Danny let her go. Daisy smiled, but she didn't look as grateful as he'd expect. You good? Max asked her. She nodded. He was tempted to check in with her about their father's reaction to Harvard, but he knew that Daisy was already feeling fragile and didn't want to set her off again. Due to the complications of their family situation, Max and Daisy had spent a lot of time together in their earlier years, but in the past decade or so, that had changed. It had started with Max babysitting Daisy occasionally when Max was in his teens. Daisy was close to her mother, but they managed to forge a connection born out of the gap in things. Sorry, I got a message. Um, Things that they didn't want to tell her mother. He been the one she asked what wanking meant when she was 11. Um, and she heard someone say it on the schoolyard. He'd be the one she called when she was drunk at a party at 15 and didn't want to go home with the boy who was pursuing her or pressuring her. He was the one she called when she was wondering why her father didn't love her. It was something that enraged and confused Max in equal parts. He'd made his peace with the fact that his father didn't love him, but the man must have been a bona fide psycho if he didn't love Daisy. He found it difficult to imagine anyone more lovable than she was. Max, the head chef called, Ice. Max's heart sank as he put down his knife and removed his glove and looked towards the freezer. Max hadn't had the greatest start to his career in hospitality. In his first week, he dropped $1,000 ceramic Japanese Santoko blade. The tip broke on the impact. His dad had screamed at him in front of the entire restaurant, calling him humiliating names and waving the knife about as his sous chef intervened, taking the knife and muttering, All right, Ian, enough now. Let the boy go back to work. We have orders. Since then, his father had been all over him during every shift. It felt like his father wanted him to mess up, desperate to have an excuse to berate or humiliate him. Needless to say, if you're looking to find fault in someone and you tend to find it, it wore Max down, and the more mistakes his father found, the harder Max found it to concentrate. He began to find himself on edge, even when he wasn't at work. It affected his appetite, his sleep. He lost weight. Nothing much motivated him besides lying on the couch with his phone and gaming. Then last week, his dad had been breathing down his neck, and what he found he when he mistaken um Zatsky for aioli and sent it out with a bowl of fries to a customer his father had wanted to impress. His father was incensed. He called Max a effing idiot and incompetent fool and other names less refined and even more offensive. The rest of the staff, so used to this kind of spectacle, didn't even look up from their stations. When his father was finished yelling, he sent Max back to the freezer. Max was barely inside when the door slammed closed and he was plunged into darkness. Max felt his way to the door and reached for the handle. It was jammed or locked from the outside. He thumped on the door and called out, "Hey, I'm in here," but he could barely hear himself over the fan. He thumped again, nothing. Wow. Panic came quickly. It was freezing in there. He pounded on the door and screamed as loud as he could. He punched and kicked the door until his knuckles bled. He was about to clear one of the racks to try to ram the door when it opened. His father stood there. "No more F ups," he said. Not this man locked his son in the freezer. This is about to piss me off. Max grabbed his father by the front of his t-shirt. The rage he felt seemed to build in him. He felt stronger and more powerful than he ever felt. He thought that he might unalive him right there in the kitchen. The thought frightened him so much that he let his father go and took several steps away. Ian threw back his head and roared with laughter. Max's knuckles were still swollen and bandaged and sore. He hadn't been able to go back inside the freezer since then. Even thinking about the ordeal made Max start to break out in panic. He managed to find his way around it, asking Daisy or Danny to grab things out of the freezer for him, but today there was no one else. He glanced at the freezer, which was being held open by a crate since he's damaged the interior handle. It felt like a tiny visceral humiliation for Max's benefit. "Max!" screamed the head chef. "Ice! Now!" As Max was processing his thought, he noticed Yvette ducking into the freezer. She emerged a moment later with a bucket of ice. "Here," she said. "Oh," he said, taking it. Thank you so much." She nodded and a moment later was gone, almost as if she really was a French spy, like some of the staff joked. She certainly had kept an eye on what was happening in the kitchen. In this particular moment, Max was grateful, but only for a second, because then his father walked into the kitchen covered in green gunk. "Daisy!" he bellowed, now pausing on his way to his office. "My office!" Daisy didn't move. "No!" Ian stopped walking. She took off her apron. Her hands, Max noticed, were shaking. Ian turned. "Did you hear me, Daisy?" "Yes, I heard." She threw the apron on the floor. The kitchen, usually loud, became very quiet. The chefs focused on their food. The Comans kept their eyes on the stations. Only Danny, pausing from mopping the floor, gawked unashamedly. "In that case," Ian said, "you're fired." Daisy wore a look on her face that Max had never seen before. Contempt. "You'll regret that," she told him, and she left. Oh my goodness. Chapter 7. Interview with Max Curley. "What happened to your hands?" asked Detective Lee. Max Curley had been sitting with his hands in his lap tucked below the interview table. No doubt he planned to keep them there. He was a polite kid, handsome with the classic terrifying rich kid in trouble look about him. Typically, rich kids were accompanied by their fathers, but for obvious reasons that wasn't possible today. "What do you mean?" "Your hands," she said. "Can we see them?" Excuse me. He licked his split, scabbed knuckles. Yellowish purple bruises bloomed on both sides, but it was hard to tell if the bruises were coming or going. The right hand was as bad as the left. "What happened?" "I punched the wall," Max said. "With both hands?" Collins piped up. "What did the wall do to you?" "Nothing," Max muttered. "Just some angsty stuff to do with a girl." He shot a look at Collins, perhaps looking for some male understanding. Collins did look a little sympathetic. "Where were you last night, Max, between midnight and 1 a.m.?" Detective Lee asked. Max's polished boat shoe bounced underneath the interview desk. "Home, I guess. At my mother's house." "You still live with your mother?" Detective Lee asked. "No, but I stay with her sometimes. She's single and she gets lonely, you know." Detective Lee, being single herself, felt attacked. "I suppose she'll verify this then." "Of course. So she was there with you between midnight and 1 a.m.?" "Yes," Max asked. Lee watched him closely, letting the silence linger. He grew more and more uncomfortable. "We know your mother wasn't home between midnight and 1 a.m., Max," Lee said. which begs the question, why are you lying to us? Chapter 8, The Night of the Murder. Emma Davies, Ian's girlfriend, was in the office working on the reel for Curly's social media when Max rushed past, disappearing out of the door to the parking lot. It had been a hectic evening. Fridays were always were, of course, but this one was shaping up to be a doozy. First, Daisy had thrown a smoothie at her father, which Emma found quite impressive for the shy little thing, and then he'd fired her. There would be blowback from the ex-wives for that, from MJ certainly, and probably the others too. Not that Ian would care. He may have been courting this kind of blowback to make himself feel important and powerful, but perhaps that was a step too far. The fact was, although she was sleeping with Ian, she didn't know him all that well. She posted her reel and then followed Max outside. He'd been a bit wobbly since the incident with the freezer last week, which with good reason. Emma would have been beside herself if she'd been locked in the freezer. She told Ian that too and refused to go home with him the night that it happened. She doubted it would make him change his behavior, but at least he would know that there were consequences to every action. Max! He was standing on the rubbish bins, leaning against the wall as if he'd fallen over without it. Hi, I heard about Daisy, she said. Max shook his head. He's such an a-hole. Who fires their own daughter? He looked good, standing there all lanky and tall and chiseled with lots of disheveled hair. There were glimmers of his father here and there, but while Ian was a handsome man, Max's good looks approached movie star standards. Emma shrugged. Where is she? She left about an hour ago. He slumped against the wall. I'm kind of jealous. What I give to never step foot back inside this place. So quit, she said. It was as if she told him to fly. I can't. Why not? But she already knew. Another way Max differed from his father was personality. He was considerate, polite, earnest, too full of self-doubt to be decisive, too full of honor to do something in his own best interest. She didn't know him overly well, but well enough to know that he enlisted help for the smallest of decisions, like whether he should book his upcoming flight to the Gold Coast on points and then agonize over the decision he made, wondering if he made the right choice. Because I can't, he said finally. Emma nodded. Fair enough. Can I ask about you? Can I ask you something? Can I ask about you? Child. Max gaze skirted around his feet and then finally landed on her. What do you see in him? Is it just the money? No, she said, it's the sex. He made a vomiting face. Never say that again. She laughed. I'm serious, Max said. I don't get it. You're young and hot, and he's my dad. Young and hot? Really? She tried for a sultry smile. So what is it? Max appeared genuinely interested. About my dad. Emma considered the question. She'd been lying about the sex. The sex was good, but she'd had better. The truth was it probably the novelty, the sense of importance that she felt sleeping with the owner. She thought that it would be a one-off thing, but since that night they'd effed in the back of the office after closing. He purchased her heart. He pursued her heart. He purchased her. He pursued her heart, sending flowers, buying jewelry, getting her and her friends restaurant reservations anywhere they wanted. For this reason, when he started off referring to her as his girlfriend, she allowed it. It wouldn't last, she knew that, especially since the gifts and special treatment were already slowing down. Lately, she'd been getting a weird vibe from him, less adoration and more expectation. A few days ago, she told him he needed to lift his game. She meant it as a joke, but he didn't laugh. He looked like he was furious with her, which is probably a sign that it was time to wind things up. She shrugged. It's just a bit of fun. Surely you can have a bit of fun with someone your own age. His gaze lingered on her mouth. Emma wondered if he was flirting with her. Maybe I could. She cocked her head, flirting right back. He grinned, his left dimple indented. You definitely could. He wavered slightly on his feet, and for a moment Emma thought he was going to kiss her. It wouldn't have been unwelcome. A kiss from her boyfriend's son was the kind of scandal she liked in her life. Unfortunately, he didn't kiss her because before anything happened, the door swung open and Ian was standing there. Emma, he said, Max, what the H is going on out here? Chapter 9, Interview with Emma Davies. Emma Davies, Detective Lee observed, was the ultimate cool girl. Three things played into this assignment. One, she was 25 years old. Two, she had chestnut hair that bounced and jeans that hung perfectly from her hips. Her phone hung from a pearl wrist strap, and her keys hung off a key ring shaped like a giant E. And most importantly, three, she was entirely unruffled by the fact that she was being interviewed by police detectives about the murder of her 55-year-old boyfriend. So, Ian Curley was your boyfriend? Lee asked. Emma appeared to think about this. Boyfriend sounds a bit juvenile, doesn't it? I prefer men friend. Lee very nearly laughed. Man friend, then. Although, Emma continued, I suppose the terminology is a little mute since he's dead. She didn't seem particularly distressed by the fact, Lee noticed. Then again, neither had either of his children. Emma shifted in her seat, and Lee caught sight of a shadow on the side of her neck, peeking out from her shirt. She popped the collar for maximum coverage, Lee guessed. What happened there? Lee asked her. Emma's hand immediately rose to her base of her throat, and then she lifted her collar inadequately. Looks like a bruise, Lee said. She shrugged. We all have our kinks. Don't knock it till you try it. Lee couldn't decide if she respected or was appalled by her candor. Collins, however, clearly had made his decision. He sat up straight in his seat, paying attention for the first time all day. You mean you and Curly? Lee jumped in. She just about come to terms with Collins being useless. Bring about complaints for being inappropriate with the witnesses was a step too far. Emma, are you saying the mark on your neck is the result of consensual strangulation by Ian Curtley? Yes, she said. Not consensual strangulation. And this happened last night? Where? In Ian's office? Lee considered herself her open-minded, but it was one fetish she didn't understand. In her early days on the beach, she once had a drug dealer pin her to the wall by the throat and hold her there for almost a minute. She remembered it clearly, and there was nothing kinky about it. Did she reciprocate? Emma's cool girl persona faltered. Pardon? Did you strangle him or do anything else physical in nature? Collins leaned forward eagerly. If you're looking for a blow by blow, Emma said, I suggest watching a porno. We're not looking for a blow by blow, Lee said sternly. We're looking for a murderer. If there are any wounds of Ian's body that can be explained by BDSM, that will also be helpful to our investigation. Emma looked chided, which was something, but she didn't offer anything more. I don't want to put words into your mouth, Lee said, but if someone strangled me, I punched them in the nose. I punched them in the nose, whacked them in the head, and locked them in the freezer to die if they did that to me. Now Emma started to look scared. I didn't kill Ian, she said. I would never. I'm a social media manager, not a murderer. In that case, Lee said, you won't mind telling me where you were between midnight and 1 a.m. last night. Emma's confidence returned. I was at home in bed. Alone? Collins asked. Lee gave him a look and was about to suggest he take a break and leave her to work on Emma, but Emma cut in. No, she said, I wasn't alone. I was in bed with Max Curley. Hmm. If you're just joining or you've been here for a little while, you don't know what the heck is going on. I am reading The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hepworth. Chapter 10, The Night of the Murder. When Rosie Curley peeked from the kitchen, so what I've been noticing with whoever they're talking about the night of the murder, the next chapter is going to be their interview with the detective. So we went, they talked about, they did, was it the first wife? Hold on. So it was, we talked about the detective, the night of the murder, interviewed Yvette, night of the murder, Daisy, murder, Max, murder, Emma, murder, Rosie, murder, 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 and oh, Anita. Who the heck is Daniel? Oh, he must. Oh, that's Danny. Homicide task force meeting the night of the murder, and then another meeting the night of the murder. Okay, so that's kind of how it goes. Chapter 10: The night of the murder. When Rosie Curley peeked from the kitchen into the hallway that led to the office, she wasn't surprised to hear Ian shouting. Ian's bellowing was practically background noise here. What did surprise her was that he was shouting Emma's name. What the H is going on out here? I was interviewing him, Emma says, and flustered for socials. I'm doing it with all the staff. I asked you about this less than an hour ago. You did not. I did, Emma says. You said, I don't pay you to ask me questions. Sounds like something you would say, Yvette says on her way past. Ian hesitated. She wasn't wrong. Get back to your station, Max, Ian said, clearly uncertain enough to let it go. I'll talk to you later. Hey, Rosie. Danny, the kitchen hand, beamed at her. That boy was like a puppy trying to hump everything he came across. Hey, Danny. Ian looked around. He didn't look well. His skin had a slightly gray look to it. At least he changed out of the smoothie stained white tee worn earlier. Customers aren't allowed back here, Rosie. I'm not playing, she replied. I'm not paying, she replied, so I'm not a customer. He sighed loudly, then wiped his forehead. What do you want? She wondered if he was going to have another heart attack. His last heart attack was the reason that Ian came to her wellness studio 2 years ago on doctor's orders. Mm. Rosie's task had been to get Ian to slow down and look after himself. She'd given him one-on-one classes to fit into his hospitality schedule, and he's been a reasonable student. After a few months, his blood pressure and cholesterol were approaching the normal range. He said that he wanted to thank her by taking her to dinner at the restaurant. It was hard to articulate what transpired at dinner that night. She had plenty of wealthy clients wanting to treat her with expensive things. Over the years, she'd been a recipient of gift baskets, helicopter rides, and tickets to shows. She enjoyed the little glimpses the gifts had given her to another kind of life. She assumed this is what this would be, but this was a little more than a glimpse. He wanted her to be a part of that life. Hard to articulate what it did to her being the sole focus of Ian Curley's affections. He swept her off her feet. It was his confidence, his cooking, his dry humor. Most of all, it was how much he liked her. As a young woman starting a business, Rosie's world was one of insecurity and uncertainty. Ian's world was one of safety and certainty. A life where he could, a life with him would be easy and lovely, and it was for a while, but it all ended the night of the accident. Next thing, it happened 6 months ago, the night of Daisy's Barbie and Ken themed 18th birthday party. Rosie already knew she made a mistake marrying Ian. It had become obvious within days of the wedding. She probably should have spoken to Ian as soon as she started having these thoughts, but sometimes it was just easier to wait and see. Besides, Rosie had been looking forward to the party. Daisy had been a gorgeous Barbie, surrounded by a gaggle of gorgeous Barbie friends. Ian had given a wonderful speech. Even though he seemed largely uninterested in his daughter, he risen to the challenge and delivered a speech that was both heartfelt and funny and riddled with poignant anecdotes about her childhood. Rosie had been moved. Daisy had been in tears. It was almost enough to make Rosie fall back in love with him until they were walking out to the car at the end of the night. Your speech was beautiful, she said, unlocking the Range Rover. Ian said. He waved at two cans on the other side of the road, getting into an Uber. I think Daisy loved it. Good, good, he said. He took the car keys from her hand. He'd driven them to the party. Rosie, as a non-drinker, had assumed she would drive home. You okay to drive? She asked. He gave her a look and walked around to the driver's side. She hadn't been paying attention to Ian's drinking, and he held his alcohol well. Unlike most people who suddenly became chatty or angry or defensive after a drink or two, Ian appeared largely unchanged by alcohol. He didn't seem particularly drunk. Up until that point, if anyone questioned Rosie about the age difference, she'd been defensive. It's just a number, she said. It makes no difference at all. But it wasn't true. Not really. In this instance, for example, she didn't feel like she could insist on driving. But if he had been 30 or 40 rather than 54 years old, would she have persisted, grabbed the keys back from him? Maybe, but it didn't feel appropriate to do this with Ian. He was a grown up. If he said it was okay to drive, he was okay to drive. Thank you for the hearts. He wasn't driving fast. He wasn't distracted. His hands were on the wheel at 10 and 2. His eyes were on the road. The boy appeared from nowhere on an e-scooter. He was wearing a grass skirt and a Lee Hawaiian can. He must have come out of the alleyway because one minute he wasn't there, the next he was. He came in front of the windshield so quickly it made a miracle that Ian had been able to swerve in time. The car careened towards the footpath. That's when Rosie saw the girl illuminated in the Range Rover headlights. She wore scrubs, a white coat, and a stethoscope around her neck. Surgeon Barbie. Unlike the boy who appeared in the flash that fell slow, the girl saw what was going to happen, and she held up her hands uselessly. Then there was a dull thud, and Surgeon Barbie was gone. Ian and Rosie were out of the car in the milliseconds. Call an ambulance, she screamed at Ian. The phone was already in his hand. Rosie performed CPR on the girl's limp body for several minutes while they waited for the ambulance. By the time a crowd of party guests had gathered, a mortified circle of disheveled Barbies and Kens, young girls wailed, young men had to be restrained by friends. A doctor presented himself, a parent dressed in jeans and a black t-shirt that said Feminist Barbie. She took over the CPR. I'm sorry, sir, Rosie heard a police officer say to Ian at one point a few yards away, but I'm going to need to breathalyze you. You are the owner of this vehicle, right? That's correct, Ian said, but I wasn't driving. My wife was. The girl died that night. She was a school friend of Daisy's. Her name was Isla Stone. No one questioned that Rosie was the one driving. The boy who scooted in front of the car hadn't seen who was behind the wheel, nor had anyone else. The coroner's inquest had wrapped up after the couple of months, and the event had been declared an accident, a terrible, tragic accident. Ian thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. For Rosie, it was just the beginning. Ian took Rosie's arm and guided her towards the back door, away from listening ears, then lowered his voice. Is this about the accident again? She saw something in his eyes, something that was unusually hidden behind a dry sense of humor and a scathing attitude. He didn't like it when people weren't happy with him. He wanted to be forgiven. A girl died, Ian. And how much did I pay her parents? $1 million. Rosie felt the heat rise in her fresh as the day it happened. $1 million doesn't give them their daughter back. Then why exactly did you donate it to the GoFundMe? Because I had to find a way to live with myself, she said. Clearly you didn't have that issue. A flash of color crossed Ian's cheeks. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Yvette poked her head around the corner. Oh, Ian, there you are. The customers at the table 5. I've asked to meet the chef. I'll be there in 2 minutes, Yvette. Forget it. Rosie turned to leave. She didn't have any arguments left. Ian didn't understand. He never would. She headed back towards the restaurant. Stop. She was almost at the door, but she did. But she was almost at the door, but she did. Ian was so commanding she couldn't help it, even after everything. You came in here for something, he said. She hesitated a moment, then turned around. I have a breakfast for the staff at the Pilates studio in the morning, and I just got a message canceling the order I made. Do you have any croissants in the freezer? She knew from his facial expression he was taking inventory in his mind. How many do you need? 50. He nodded. I'll dig them out of the freezer after closing. I can drop them off to you on my way home. You're a doll. Remember that, he said dryly, then headed off to greet table 5. What is, did I accidentally post something? I got everybody responding to my stuff on Instagram. Like, ain't no, like, didn't everybody knew how to do all that. I'm sitting here like, what the heck did I post? Alright, if you're just joining or you've been here didn't know what was going on, we are reading The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hepworth. Chapter 11, Interview with Rosie Curley. When Rosie Curley entered the interview room, Colin sat at attention for the first time all day. You're Ian's wife, he said, practically drooling. Rosie must have been used to it because she didn't seem startled by his less than professional greeting. No, Rosie said. Well, yes, technically, but soon to be ex-wife, or I suppose not now. I'm a widow. Rosie was so perfect looking, Lee had to fight the urge to put out a hand and touch her. Excuse me. She felt certain that if she did, she'd find that her shiny, unblemished skin was made of plastic. We're sorry for your loss, Lee said, though, like the others, Rosie didn't seem particularly upset. Thank you. Will this take long? Just a few questions, Lee assured her. Firstly, were you aware that there were security cameras at the restaurant? Her expression told Lee everything she needed to know. I mean, I assumed there would be, but I don't know where they are. Lee glanced at Collins. She expected Collins to be delighted. This was the best part of being a cop, the gotcha part. But Collins looked hesitant, like he really didn't want to be upset at Rosie, for God's sake. There are three, Lee told her. One in the parking lot, one in the kitchen, and the other one in the restaurant. Okay? Unfortunately, they were vandalized, but we were able to retrieve some footage. Lee picked up her phone and handed it to Rosie. There was a pause video on the screen. Play it. Pressed play. The footage was from inside the restaurant. The restaurant was empty. The camera wobbled, and the hand could have been seen in the corner of the frame. The hand tilted the camera so it was facing the ceiling. The video stopped. What am I looking at? Rosie asked. Lee took the phone and replayed the video, pausing it right before the camera tilted. The hand in the frame had neon pink nails. Rosie put down the phone, her cheeks flaming red. Why are you tampering with the camera? Lee asked her. She struggled. Ian uses the camera to perv on the waitresses, okay? It's gross. I was protecting their privacy. It was a weak excuse. If the camera is pointing towards the restaurant, Lee said, it's hardly inappropriate. Well, Rosie said, I didn't like it. Lee sighed. And the other two cameras? I don't know anything about any other cameras. Lee surveyed her perfect face for any indication that she was lying, an indication of guilt. It was hard to tell. You didn't vandalize the other two cameras? No. The door from the kitchen and the parking lot, you don't know anything about the tape that was jammed in the lock to prevent it from locking? Now, Rosie's guilt was written all over her perfect face. I'd like to speak to my lawyer, she said. Why you want to speak to a lawyer if you're not guilty? Chapter 12, The Night of the Murder. Emma was getting ready to leave for the night when Ian appeared in the office. She barely seen him all night. Part of her wished that she hadn't seen him now. There's a fight, I'll never get tired of it, he said, smiling softly. He closed the door and came inside. What a night. He stretched, then leaned across the desk to kiss her. I don't think so, she said, ducking away from him. He sniffed himself. Do I smell? Actually, yes, she said, but it's not that. He removed his white coat and tossed it in the laundry basket and started checking the rosters on the whiteboard. What is it? Emma took a steady breath. She had always been a direct communicator. Her family and friends knew her as a straight shooter, but that didn't mean she enjoyed having difficult conversations. Did you really need to fire Daisy? Ian smiled, shaking his head. I don't need your feedback on my children, Emma. You need someone's feedback. He looked in her direction. Is that right? Yes, you treat Max like crap, and Daisy got into Harvard. Harvard, even, Ian. You barely acknowledge what an achievement that is. Poor form from a father. Noted, he said evenly. He stood between her and the door, which he leaned against to fold his arms. Anything else? Yes, Emma said. This thing between us has run its course. This thing? Yes. She saw comprehension on his face, but he didn't give away a lot else. What brought this on? She shrugged. That was never going to be a long-term thing, Ian. Why not? He wasn't begging, not even arguing. His demeanor was of calm curiosity, but there was a menacing undertone. Is there someone else? Emma threw her backpack over her shoulders. I'm leaving now. He remained in the front of the door. By this thing, he says, do you mean your job as well? She laughed. Sure, my job as well if that makes it easier for you. Let me pass, please. He didn't move. Why do you say stuff like that? You need to make sure that you buy the dough and you can get out of the dough. Ian, as grouchy as he could be, had always been a gentleman with her, and Emma wasn't a timid person, but the fact was he wasn't a small guy, and they were in a windowless office. It was late, and he was blocking the door. Move, she said. His body was perfectly still, his face was perfectly neutral. She reached round him and bashed her fist against the door. Let me out of here, or I'll. But she couldn't finish the threat because Ian put his hands tight around her throat. Hmm. Chapter 13, The Night of the Murder. It had been nearly 2 hours since Daisy Curley stormed out of Harry Fowler's office, and she was still in the parking lot, half hidden by the rubbish bins. She texted her mother and Anita too to tell them what had happened, but neither of them had texted or called back. Usually her mother drove her home. She could have ordered an Uber, of course, but she hadn't done that because tonight she had other plans, and she never wanted was to. All she ever wanted was to be important to her father. It sounded fickle, but it was true. So much of her life had been about trying to impress him, and each attempt had been worse than the last. She tried for a while to find love in other places. The boys at school had been the lucky recipients of that search. And it was true that the healing feeling of being desired was intoxicated, but in the end, it was fickle as her father's love. Now here she was in the parking lot with the irrefutable proof that she wasn't important to her father after all. He couldn't have cared less that she'd gotten into Harvard than he fired her from his restaurant. But rather than the usual feelings of sadness and rejection and disappointment, she felt angry, which was preferably emotion. At some point, her father would come out. Then, for at least a few seconds, she'd be important to him because she'd be the reason he lived or died. A sensor light near the side door went off, lighting up the parking lot. Daisy gripped the chef's knife she grabbed from the kitchen as she left. Then she stood straight as the door opened. Chapter 14, The Night of the Murder. When Anita looked at her watch and saw that it was 11 p.m., she blinked hard and then checked again. The night had flown by in what felt like minutes, and suddenly she felt rather drunk. It had been a draining evening after Daisy had thrown the drink at Ian. Anita, Anita had to physically restrain MJ from going after her daughter. Ian had that coming. Anita told her, now isn't the time to intervene. Let her stand up to her father. He'll respect her for it. Anita get on my nerve, and not like she ain't did nothing. MJ had taken some convincing, but eventually she sat down. Anita had been as startled as MJ to see Daisy retaliate against her father. Startled and proud as ever, she underestimated the girl they all had, which was exactly what they needed to leave her to it. Anita had ordered another round of margaritas. Rosie had ordered a juice. Yvette kept their glasses full all evening, and now she realized she was drunk. In the last 10 minutes, the restaurant had emptied out apart from her and MJ. Time to go. They were gathering up their things when MJ looked at her phone and gasped. What is it? Anita asked. It's Daisy. Ian fired her. Apparently, it had happened a couple of hours earlier while they were enjoying their drinks and taking turns talking disparagingly about Ian. It may have been the alcohol or the menopause, or perhaps the fact that she felt guilty for telling MJ that Daisy would be able to deal with Ian on her own. But when Anita heard that Ian had fired her, she felt a flash of rage. Before she knew it, she was out of her seat and charged into the kitchen. MJ was hot on her heels. Ian, they bellowed. Ian Curley, where are you? But in the kitchen, instead of finding Ian, they found Emma. Where's Ian? MJ demanded. I don't know, she replied. Yvette walked into the kitchen and surveyed the situation. MJ was thumbing out an angry text to Ian. She handed her phone to Anita, who added her own. What's going on? Yvette asked. Ian, Anita said. Have you seen him? I'll check the bathroom, MJ said when they were done texting. Righto, Emma said, turning towards the door. I'm headed off. Emma's voice had an unusual note to it. Anita looked at her. Is that blood on your shirt? Yes, but don't worry, it's Ian's. Anita didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. In the end, she didn't do either because she noticed the red marks at the base of Emma's throat. Are you all right, Emma? Fine, she said, and took a few paces towards the door. Emma, stop. What happened to your neck? Yvette asked her. Emma let her silence say what she needed to. Ian did that? Anita asked. Yes, but don't worry. I punched him in the nose, hence the blood. Anita felt a twinge somewhere deep down. When she was married to Ian, they argued regularly about the same old topics. Her working outside the home, he was against it. Him wanting to know where she'd been and who she was with, then checking up on her. Ooh, is it like you like what you see and what you come on, check up on what she would spend her money on, and yes, he had a temper. She spent a good deal of time walking on eggshells to avoid setting him off during and after their marriage. She always told herself that Ian was just protective and perhaps a little old fashioned. With MJ, it had escalated. Ian called it anxiety. His obsession was always knowing where she was. During bad patches, he'd ring her at all hours of the day, checking up on her. She gave up her art at his behest. She put Daisy in daycare from an early age. She put everything aside so that she could be there for him in the capacity he needed. Then came the incident. What is up with all these incidents? The official version from both MJ and Ian was that she slipped while dragging her suitcase down the stairs. Anita had probed MJ for more, but she'd been so reluctant to discuss it. Anita let it go, but when took up with Rosie, she'd watched closely, very closely. If something happened, she told herself they would know it. His relationship with Emma was so new that they hadn't thought to watch her. That was their mistake. You can't be alone tonight, Yvette told her. Have you somewhere to go? Emma nodded. Good. Are you sure you don't know where Ian is? Emma hitched her bag up on her shoulder. I locked him in the freezer, she said. There was a short silence. Then Yvette threw her head back and laughed. Chapter 15. Interview with MJ and Anita Curley. It was hot in the little room. Like her clicking pen trick, it was something Leah had done to make the witnesses uncomfortable, or in this case, the witnesses. Um, we don't usually interview witnesses together, but as you spent a large part of the night in question together, we thought it might be a good idea. Fine with me, MJ said, and me, Anita chimed in. Great. The purpose of the interview is to establish your movements on the night of the murder. I understand that you both were the last customers to leave the restaurant last night. That's right, MJ replied. Yes, Anita said. I also understand that at around 11 you received a text message from your daughter, Daisy, saying that she was fired by her father, correct? MJ and Anita glanced at each other. How does she know that? Anita asked. We know a lot of things, Lee said, glancing at Collins, who rested his chin in his hands like a bored high school student. Sweat patches bloomed under his arms. Lee wished that she could go back and change the we to I. What did you do to when you received the text message from Daisy? What do you think? MJ said. We stormed to the kitchen and demanded to see Ian. And did you find him? Lee asked. Not at first. So what did you do? Lee asked. MJ looked sheepish. I texted him. Can you read me the text that you sent him, MJ? MJ reluctantly took her glasses out of their case and perched them on her nose. Then she held her phone back and purred at the screen. If you fire our daughter, I'll unalive you. She took off her glasses. Obviously, I was joking. Can you please read me the next message you sent? MJ put her glasses back on and read, Anita will unalive you too. And the message after that, Lee asked. The next message was from Anita. Can you read it, Anita? Lee said. Anita borrowed MJ's glasses. I will. From Anita. She lowered the glasses. For every wife threatens to unalive their husbands on a daily basis, ex-wives do it on an hourly basis. While this may be true, you can understand that we take the threat more seriously when the husband actually ends up dead. Anita pursed her lips. Well, we didn't do it. We know, Lee admitted after a long and unnecessary pause. We have footage of you both arriving at the bar next door at 11:15 p.m. Shortly after that, Ian sent you a message saying thanks for your help, which indicates that he was alive when you left. We also have footage of you leaving the bar at 2 a.m., which is great news. It means neither of you are suspects. Oh, MJ said. The women sat back in their chairs, relieved. Well, good, Anita said. Unfortunately, Lee said to MJ, this isn't such great news for your daughter. Daisy, who is the one who wasn't who is the only one who doesn't have an alibi for the time of the murder. Of course she has an alibi, MJ said. Not that she's really revealed it to us. You can't suspect Daisy, MJ cried. That's ridiculous. I understand, but she's the only one who doesn't have an alibi for the time of the murder. What about the staff? Anita said. Have you spoken to them? And what about Danny, the kitchen hand? Lee looked down at her file, then over to Collins. Did you contact the kitchen hand for an interview? Collins shook his head. For crying out loud, call him in. Chapter 16. Interview with Daniel Brodecki. Daniel reminded Detective Lee of a ferret. It had to do with the above average distance between his eyes. She thought perhaps the below average distance between his forehead and chin. It also could have been between his teeth, tiny and gappy, with unusually long incisors. Where were you last night, Mr. Danny? Just call me Danny. Danny, where were you last night? At work. What time did you leave? It must have been just after 11. I guess the ex-wives had just hold on. The ex-wives had just let free Ian out of the freezer. Emma had locked him in there. Did you know about that? And he was storming around complaining about women and saying something about croissants. Then what happened? I went out back. I dumped the trash and was about to jump in the car when I saw her. She was standing there. Who? Daisy. Even Colin's eyebrows rose at this. Daisy Curley? Yep, she lunged at me with a knife. He held up his arms, revealing what looked like a paper cut. I'm telling you, chicks are all crazy. Lee stepped forward, putting her elbows on the table. Daisy had a knife? He nodded. She thought that I was her father. She was upset that she didn't think that he loved her. Danny grinned. I'm not one to boast, but I've always done well in the past with emotional girls, so I asked her if she wanted to talk. And did she? Sure did, he smirked. She had a lot of baggage to unload, and I'm a very good listener. I'll bet. Lee had to fight to keep you from rolling her eyes. So you talked to her in the parking lot? Nope, I drove her home. Another grand. Lee was starting to realize why Daisy hadn't wanted to say where she'd been. If she made the grave error of spending time with Danny, she wouldn't have wanted to admit it either. Uh-huh. So what time did you get to her place? Don't know, 11:30 or so? Then what? Did she go inside? Another grand. Not right away. As a single woman, Lee was affronted. Daisy was sweet, pretty, and intelligent girl, not to mention a girl of extraordinary means. If Daisy had hooked up with Danny, there was no hope for any single woman. So you and Daisy were intimate? His face clouded over. No, she just wanted to talk. Lee felt something move inside her. She suspected it was her faith in humanity being restored. I see. I assumed that after all the talking there would be some. He waggled his eyebrows, but she just said thanks and went inside. Danny looked bitterly disappointed. What time was that? Lee asked. Around 12:30 a.m. or 1 a.m. Curly would have been dead in the freezer by then, Collins said, finally deciding to chime in. Lee kept her gaze on Danny. So what did you do then? You went straight home? Danny opened his mouth, but before he could speak, his face froze. Danny? Lee prompted. His face remained frozen for another few seconds, then he blinked, shook his head. Yes, I went home. And there was. Danny and Daisy had alibis, which meant they were officially out of suspects. Chapter 17, The Night of the Murder. Roger Stone's parked in a side street rather than a parking lot. He had been assured that the cameras in the parking lot of Curly had been dismantled. Who the heck is Roger? But he wasn't going to take any chances. His family had already lost enough. He turned off the car. This got to be the daughter of the girl that he hit. He turned off the car engine and put on his gloves. Then he reached for the baseball bat. It was midnight, the second time Roger had been to the restaurant. He'd taken his wife Hillary to Curly's for her 50th birthday, and Ian had treated them both like royalty. He didn't know Ian particularly well, but Isla was good friends with Daisy, and Roger had once considered Ian Curley an acquaintance. It was an accident. What happened to Isla? Scotty Dawson was scooted right into the path of their Range Rover. He said to himself the car had no choice but to swerve. Ian's wife Rosie had remained at the hospital until Isla's life support was turned off. Roger remembered her, tucked tastefully behind family members and friends, not making a scene or taking up space. She just barely witnessed. She shown the same respect at Isla's funeral. In the light of this, Roger and Hillary couldn't find it within them to turn their rage and grief to Rosie, even if she was the one at the wheel. There were tributes to Isla all over social media. Once Roger would have scoffed, but instead he poured over them, marveling at the photos he'd never seen, sobbing at the moments in clenched words of Isla's peers about his daughter. He and Hillary had been mortified when she discovered a GoFundMe page had been set up by two of Isla's friends. We don't need charity, Hillary had said. Roger had also been uncomfortable. They weren't rich like the Curleys, but they were comfortably off. They didn't need money to pay for a memorial, but their younger daughter Marlo had told them that this was the way the young folks showed their respect. We'll donate the money, Roger told Hillary, to a charitable organization. Which one? She cried. She didn't have cancer, Roger. There's no fun for girls who are walking down the street after a party. We'll find something, he soothed. Sure enough, they discovered an organization that provided free rehab and resources to young adults injured in automobile accidents. A few days after the funeral, they received a very, very large donation. The donation was anonymous to the public, but as a beneficiary, Roger could see the back end. The name listed was John Rowe, which didn't ring any bells. He checked the email address, rosie.curley at wellnesslovers1.com. Ah, he thought, so this is how the wealthy ease their guilt. Roger called Rosie the next day. I'm brokenhearted that my daughter is dead, Roger told her, but this is unnecessary. It's very necessary, Rosie said. And don't worry, Ian can afford it. It's very necessary. Ian can afford it. The words played in his mind long after Roger ended the call. It's very necessary. Why was it very necessary? Roger rang Ian. Ian, it's Roger Stone, he said. It was a long pause that he did it. Ian didn't remember who he was. You, my daughter, was Isla. Your wife was driving the car that hit my daughter. Of course, Roger, Ian said. Sorry, mate. I was just, never mind. What can I do for you? I was calling to tell you thank you for the donation to the GoFundMe. It was incredibly generous. This second pause told Roger everything he needed to know. Ian clearly had no idea what Roger was thinking about, which meant Rosie had made the donation without telling him. It's very necessary. Oh, well, no problem. You're welcome. We all have to do our bit, don't we? When he called Rosie back, it had only been taking a nudge to get the truth out of her. She agreed that consequences were required. She even offered to take down the cameras and jam the side of the door open. She also said she'd make sure Ian was there alone. Roger had the feeling that Ian had done more to injure Rosie than merely blame her for the accident, but that was her business. He wasn't there to avenge Rosie, only his daughter. The side door was open, like Rosie said it would be. The kitchen light was on, but the place appeared empty. Roger took a few steps forward, pausing when he heard a thump. The door of the commercial freezer was ajar, propped open with a green plastic crate. Bingo! Roger walked into the doorway, baseball bat lifted, and waited. Ian was deep inside, moving some racks off the shelf. Racks. I was about to sing Rack City, but I can't remember how it goes. Roger wanted Ian to look at him and know what was coming, the same way Isla must have looked at Ian behind the wheel. Finally, Ian did look at him in the eye, though his look more curious than concerned. This is for Isla, Roger said as he swung. He never been much of a baseball player, but this was an impressive swing. The sound of the bat connecting with Ian's head was less impressive. Not the thwack he heard in the movies, more of a dull, wet, slappy sound. It propelled Ian backward into the back wall of the freezer. His eyes rolled back and he slid down onto the floor. Chapter 18, Homicide Task Force Meeting, Curly Murder. Lee opened a bottle of water and took a large swig. She was exhausted. The first 24 hours was always critical in the murder investigation, but here they were 24 hours in and they had nothing. Right, she said after swallowing. She'd given up hope that Collins was listening, but since he was there, it felt polite to include him. In terms of suspects, we have Max, who we know was with Emma. MJ and Anita were together until 2 a.m., which means they couldn't have done it. Danny, the kitchen hand, was with Daisy. Rosie's story has been verified by her neighbor. Was there someone else? Collins yawned. The Frenchie. Yvette, she was at the police station on camera. She said she would be pretty convenient, don't you think? Collins said, lifting both arms above his head in a stretch. Lee considered that. She couldn't figure out what annoyed her more. The stench that was released from Collins' pits into the tiny room, for the fact that on this one she had to agree with him. Chapter 19. The Night of the Murder. Yvette could see herself on the screen that was displayed in the corner of the police station. She arrived half an hour ago around 11:30 and had made sure that she remained invisible on camera ever since. It seemed fitting to Yvette, Ian's life It seemed fitting to Yvette, Ian's life ending at the hands of a vengeful father, almost biblical, an eye for an eye. She couldn't help feeling rather pleased with how it all worked out. She wasn't a hitman, of course, she was a private investigator, and in this case she considered herself more of a project manager. She had organized the hit. It was going to happen with or without her. Her role was to make sure that the wrong person didn't go to jail for it. She'd been introduced to Curly family a few years back. MJ had been the one to make contact after becoming concerned that Ian was cheating on her. Her was He was, of course, getting the evidence was such easy work she felt bad accepting payment at all, although she did accept it. When her job was done, Yvette had been pleased to learn that MJ and Anita had accepted Rosie into the fold. Yet Yvette dealt a lot in cheating scandals, and it always felt unfair to her when the vitriol of a scorned woman was directed at the other woman rather than at the philandering husband. The three women had become close, so close in fact that Yvette's next mission, as directed by Anita and MJ, had been to try to find out what had caused Rosie's sudden change in behavior and mood after the incident. The women knew enough about Ian to feel that standing by a responsible at best and dangerous at worst. The assignment was less as straightforward than the most, as Yvette did have clear guidelines beyond finding dirt. They decided for getting a job at Curly's would be the best way to do that. It hadn't taken Yvette long to get to the bottom of what happened the night of the party, and during the time she learned enough about Ian Curly to know that she wanted to be involved in his takedown. The women suggested several options for dealing with the matter, including blackmailing Ian, going to the police with the truth, leaking a scandal to the media, Roger Stone developing suspicions after Rosie's donation had been planned, but frankly it couldn't have worked out better. The rest of it dismantling the cameras, jamming the door open, making sure the women had airtight alibis, Yvette considered part of her duty of care. There had been a few last minute issues. Daisy getting fired, for example, had upended their plans to have both Max and her at home with their mothers, but Yvette had managed to think on her feet, asking Max to drive Emma home after what Ian had done to her was particularly genius, providing Max with not only an alibi but potentially the start of a lovely romance. Daisy's new alibi was less than ideal. Yvette could never feel good about the releasing the lecherous Danny on anyone, let alone sweet Daisy, but as she insisted on hanging around in the parking lot with a knife in her hand, she had to do something. Miss Renard, the police called. Finally, she thought. She walked to the desk. I'd like to report a stolen wallet. It was taken from my bag in the restaurant that I work in tonight. No problem. Constable Bland had came take your statement. It'll take about half an hour. You probably won't be out of here until 1 a.m. or so. Perfect, Yvette said. By that time, the job will be done. Chapter 20. Homicide Task Force Meeting Curly Murder. How can there be so many people who want to unalive one man? Detective Lee complained, and not one of them without an alibi. Detective Collins showed none of her irritations. His phone was in his lap and he was swiping past women who were far too good for him on Tinder. Maybe no one did it, he muttered. Maybe it was an accident. With two security cameras broken and a blood-forged head trauma, Collins lifted his head reluctantly. Maybe he bumped into something in the freezer. Fell hit his head, causing a head wound. His foot bumped the crate, locking him in there. Death was by hypothermia. It made her want to scream that she didn't have any better suggestions. She sighed. It's all we got, I guess. Collins looked back at his phone. Right then, ready to move on to the next one? It was unclear whether he was talking about the next case or the next woman on the phone screen, but she decided to not to ask. Fine, next one. Chapter 21, The Night of the Murder. In the parking lot of Curly's, Danny bent over the passenger seat of his car, swearing. It was 12:45 a.m. and he couldn't find his phone. It was a horrible feeling. He imagined in the olden days it was little how men felt when they lost their water skin pouch of drink of water or their tomahawk. Vulnerable, desperate. Would he survive in the next village? What would be awaiting him there? He dug into the backs of the driver's and passenger seat of his car, then looked underneath the seats in case it had fallen out of his pocket. But it was tough going without the flashlight on his phone to light the way. It must have been the restaurant, but it must. be inside the restaurant. He had his keys, which was something. He got them out, but the side door of the restaurant was unlocked. Inside, the kitchen light was on. Weird. Hello, he called. Anyone here? No response. Yvette had been closing. She wasn't the type to leave things unlocked. Hello, he called again. No one. He entered, wondering if he could tell Ian about Yvette's little oversight to get brownie points, or if she should tell Yvette that, or if he should tell Yvette that he covered for her to see if she could get use it as leverage to get him laid. Decisions. It wasn't easy being him. That's what most people didn't realize. He liked to think that he flew under the radar, taking out the trash, keeping people secret, trying to figure out how to use leverage. But there was a lot more to little Danny than people like to think. Eureka! His phone was on the counter next to the air fryer. He snatched it up and dropped it into his back pocket. He was about to when he heard a noise like a squeak or a moan. That's when he noticed the fridge was slightly open. The door hadn't been closed properly since Max beat the crap out of it while in there last week. If the frozen food is defrosted overnight, even the vet would be sure to get a blocking for that. Then he kicked the door closed with a heavy thump, and the freezer seemed to moan in thanks. You're welcome, my love, he said to Yvette, already thinking about how grateful she'd be when he told her what he'd done. Then he let himself out the side door. That's it. Well, dang. I'm just going to read the author's notes for giggles. Author's note. Dear reader, while the above story is a work of fiction, Ian Curley and Danny Broderick are real people. Their names have been used with their permission. In fact, at their urging, men will do just about anything for their 15 minutes of fame. It feels important to point out that while Ian is chef, he is not, to the best of my knowledge, a philandering abuser with three ex-wives. As to whether anyone wants him unalive, I wouldn't like to cast aspirations. I will say that given the new meat freezer that was delivered to his restaurant recently, it would be prudent for him to stay on his toes. As for Danny, he looks nothing like a ferret or a weasel. To the contrary, he's very handsome and charming, not to mention lucky with the ladies. Most importantly, he's not all lecherous, largely because he knows that would be a sure way to end up in Ian's meat freezer. If there were if that were to happen, I'm hopeful that Detective Lee and Collins will end up on the case. Some crimes I think are best left unsolved. Sally. Well, I thank y'all so much for joining. If you want to check out a couple of other Sally's novels, she wrote Darling Girls, The Soulmate, and The Good Sister. I think that reading these little short stories is giving us an introduction to how the author writes. The first one was Death Row by Freedom McFadden. This one was The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hempworth, and the next book that we'll be reading either tomorrow or Wednesday is called False Note. So stay tuned to see if we read tomorrow or Wednesday. Most likely it'll be tomorrow because I work Thursday morning, and if I can read tomorrow and kind of take a break on Wednesday, I will. But we'll see. I hope you have a good night. If you made it this far and you watched the replay, I thank you again. Thank you to those that listened, and I'll see y'all later.